Welcome back, everyone. Michael here with Offshore Citizen. There is an interesting thing that happens anytime we start learning about a new field, and that is, well, frankly, we just don't know certain things. And it can kind of be confusing and, a little bit of a mess. And I noticed this recently in a conversation with somebody else who was diving into a new field they'd never studied before, and they were saying, wow, I'm just totally lost because I know nothing. And it made me think it would be really useful to spend a few minutes today covering some of the common sort of offshore citizenship, residency type lingo. In other words, there's a lot of terminology that I use here, and that might be really common and easy to understand for people who have been in this space for a while that you might not know coming into the space originally. And it actually makes quite an important difference in how people kind of figure these things out. So today I'm going to go through for you just a bunch of terms that you might hear in our videos or other content elsewhere, and explain a bit about what those things mean so that you have a better context for just exploring in general. So look forward to doing that with you. If there's some comment or some terms that you're particularly interested in that I don't cover here, please put them in the comments below. I'll see if I can cover them in a future video. And yeah, hopefully it's helpful for you. Before we get started, if you haven't already, please hit the subscribe button, hit the all notification. Thank you for subscribing. Really appreciate your support. And if you'd like help on these topics, please reach out to us. You can book a call, calendly.com/Michael-Rosmer, link in the description below, or send a message to our websites, offshorecitizen.net and offshorecapitalist.com. All right. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is citizenship and residency. This is a common one that I find people confuse, and I'll maybe throw in there domicile as well. So citizenship, residency, domicile. I had somebody I was talking to the other day who was saying, hey, our tax domicile or our domicile, and oh no, not our residency. They had kind of the terms a little bit confused. So what is citizenship? Citizenship is the place where you can have a passport and the right to vote in, is essentially the definition. Okay, maybe you're in some crazy autocratic regime where you don't have the right to vote, but generally by having a passport you have the right to vote. If you're not a citizen, you don't have the right to vote, and you don't have the right to a passport. Okay, so passport and right to vote is what you get from citizenship. It'll have typically all the rights to live there and work there and all these other things as well, but these are the unique things you get. And this is somewhat different from residency, which could mean a combination of three things or some array of three things. Okay, the first is this is the place where you have the right to live. Okay, so you have a residency permit. This is your legal right to live there. Now note that citizens also have the right to live there, right? But residents have the right to live there without being citizens. Number two is this may be where you live, okay, your place of residence. Okay, and note that you can have multiple residences, and so you can have residency in one place and residency in another place. That's that. And that brings into our third concept, which is the concept of tax residency, which is the place whose tax rules apply to you. And again, this could be multiple places in certain circumstances. So those are really important terms. What about domicile? Domicile is not common. Most countries don't have a concept of domicile, but this is sort of like where you belong. This is where you might go and live in some other place, but your ultimate home is this other place. And although you could have multiple residencies, you can only have one domicile is the concept. So this is something you would just see namely in places like UK, Ireland, Cyprus, a few other places. So important to recognize the distinction between those terms, okay? Now, when we're talking about tax, we are interested in talking a lot about corporate versus personal. This is basically what are the tax obligations for a company versus an individual. So we need to compare those two. And there's lots of different types of companies that you might hear about: LLCs or limited liability companies, limited companies, etc. These are all sort of corporate forms, and I've done some videos separately on them. It gets a little bit nuanced, so I won't cover it here, but that's something to be aware of. Versus your personal. Next, we have within companies the concept of management and control or corporate residency, and I'm going to contrast that with controlled foreign company. Okay, so these things often get confused. I'll talk about management and control rules, and somebody will be like, oh yeah, the CFC rules or the controlled foreign companies rules. No, these things are totally separate, totally different sets of rules. Management and control rules or corporate residency rules are based on where somebody is controlling a company from. Okay, this is where they're doing the activities of running the company at the high level. Okay, this is different from controlled foreign companies, which is based on the ownership of the company. Okay, so management versus ownership, two separate things. Activity-based, ownership-based, and these have different sets of rules associated with them. So be aware of that. Management and control versus controlled foreign company. And again, there's lots of consequences of this. We can watch in some other videos. I've gone through and explained what each of these concepts means, etc. But they're really important to understanding where you will pay tax. Okay, so very, very important in those regards. Now, circling back to the subject of citizenship, some people will talk to me, they'll be like, hey, I want the citizenship or I want a second passport. So citizenship and passport are intricately tied together. Passport is the document that you get, right? Which it's a travel document. It allows you to travel. And citizenship is the legal status that you have with a country. And you will perhaps have a birth certificate or a naturalization certificate or some other document which demonstrates that you're a citizen of that country, right? And this usually is also what's needed to give you the right to get a passport. But a passport is a travel document provided to citizens, okay? It's worth noting that in some cases, say refugees, etc., may get a travel document from a country that they have a legal status with, which is not a passport. So for example, I was talking to someone not very long ago who was a refugee years ago to the US. They don't have legal status as a citizen, but they do have a travel document issued by the US which allows them to travel as somebody who doesn't have that status, which is pretty rare, but interesting to note that you can have it. So in other words, there's other travel documents aside from just passports in certain rare circumstances, okay? The next thing that we might pay attention to here is the term visa-free. We throw this around a lot, and maybe it's really apparent, but if you aren't familiar with traveling a lot, some countries require you to apply for a specific visa, okay? So we've got different statuses here. We have visa-free, visa on arrival, and then needing visas. And this is for, in order to enter the country, do you simply have the ability to just come in? And this would be based on which country you're from. Okay, so different countries have different visa-free access. The second is visa on arrival. So this is when you arrive, they basically automatically grant it to you. You don't have to apply in advance. And then the third is where you need a visa. And this is where you have to apply either online or through the embassy or something before you go in order to have the right to be in that country. And I guess that's kind of the next part is, what is a visa? Sometimes there's this distinction between visas and residency permits. And the truth is sometimes those terms can be used interchangeably. Somebody will get a multi-year visa. Generally, the difference between a visa and a residency permit is a residency permit gives you the right to live somewhere, meaning you can be there all year round. Whereas if you're having just a visa, usually there's a limited time window per year. Now, this is confused a little bit by the fact that the term digital nomad visa is being used, and often digital nomad visas will give you a full year round, and in some cases 2-year ability to live in the country. So in this sense, what you might say is that a residency permit will typically move you towards the process of naturalization, which I'll talk about in a second, whereas a visa will typically not. This being said, sometimes the terms get blended and used interchangeably, okay? And then the other thing is that often what will happen is you have to get a visa, which then you basically roll over into a residency permit. For example, if you go to Bulgaria, you get something called the Type D visa, and you use the Type D visa to then go to the immigration department and to get a residency card, all right? This brings me to naturalization. What does naturalization mean? Naturalization means the process of becoming a citizen, typically through living a certain period of time in that country. Okay, so if you hear the term citizenship by naturalization, or they naturalized somewhere, this means they typically lived there or had residency there for a long enough period of time that they qualified to become a citizen. Fair enough? So This could be contrasted with something like citizenship by descent or citizenship by investment. So citizenship by descent is the idea that you could qualify as a citizen of that country based on not you, but based on your parents or grandparents, sometimes great-grandparents, depending on, but it's your ancestry somehow. Okay, that's citizenship by descent. Then we've got, of course, citizenship by birth. You know, you're born either, in some cases, they have different birthrights. Some of them is, if you're born on our soil, you become a citizen, and the others are citizenship based on if your parents were a citizen, then you become a citizen. So either of those could be the case. This brings us to citizenship by investment, which most of the time isn't really citizenship by investment, it's citizenship by donation. And what this means is that I either donate or contribute some money to the country, or I may purchase some property or make some other type of investment into a company or into bonds, depends on the country. And on that basis, they grant me some sort of citizenship. Now we have residency by investment as well as citizenship by investment, so we do both. Okay? So yeah, those are some common terms that you're going to hear. I'm sure there's a bunch of other ones. You might hear something like brokerage account, which is essentially a bank account that is exclusively used for doing investments into like stock trading, bonds, things like that. So that's another term. Payment processing is a term that you'll hear that refers to accepting credit cards like Visa and MasterCard as a form of payment on your business. And so yeah, I'll leave it at that for now. It's going to give some general residency international type terms, but put some below that you're interested in and you think these would be ones that I should explain, and I'll happily do that for you. Otherwise, these are good. And if you have any other further questions, I mean, any of these words I'm mentioning here, you can usually just go into our channel and punch it into the search bar, and I've usually created videos previously on that topic to help explain it to you. So I hope that's helpful.